My friends, we stand at a crossroads, a pivotal moment in the story of our land. When a nation forgets God, it does not merely lose a name or a custom. It loses its very foundation. Like a house built on sand, it shakes and crumbles under the storms of life. Throughout history, the rise and fall of nations have followed a solemn pattern. When the hearts of the people turn away from the one who made them, the one who holds the stars in his hands, chaos soon follows. Justice fades, truth becomes a stranger, morality is cast aside like a forgotten garment. When a nation forgets God, it forgets the covenant written not only in stone, but inscribed on the hearts of its people. The blessings that once flowed like a mighty river begin to dry up. Prosperity turns to pride, and pride to downfall. The watchmen on the walls grow silent, and the gates swing open to enemies, both seen and unseen. Look back to the ancient cities. When their altars were abandoned, their prophets silenced, their laws broken, they fell. Babylon, Nineveh, Jerusalem, all bear witness to what happens when a nation forsakes the one who gives breath to all flesh. Yet this is not merely history's echo. It is a warning, a call to awaken. For even now, in the midst of our comforts and distractions, the signs are clear. A society that rejects divine truth is a society walking toward a shadow. But there is hope, for the God who remembers his people also remembers his promises. When a nation repents, turns its heart back, humbles itself under the hand of the Most High, restoration flows like a healing river through its streets and homes. Light returns to the darkness, justice rises like the dawn. So I call upon you, brothers and sisters, leaders and citizens alike. Remember the God who gave you breathe. Recall the covenant, the values, the truths upon which your forebears built. Let the foundations be rebuilt, not on shifting sands but on the rock of ages. When a nation remembers God, it remembers who it truly is, and in that remembering it finds its salvation. When a nation forgets God, it loses its foundation and becomes unstable. This is not merely a poetic expression, but a profound truth rooted in the very nature of existence. A nation is more than just land, laws, and people. It is a spiritual entity, a collective soul that thrives on a shared moral compass and a sense of purpose. When that compass points away from its source, the Creator, everything else begins to drift without direction. Foundations are what hold a structure firm and secure, but without them, no matter how strong the walls or grand the buildings, collapse is inevitable. In the same way, a nation without a firm foundation in God becomes vulnerable to every storm of change, every gust of cultural shift, and every wave of conflict. The stability that once held society together begins to crack and crumble, unseen at first, but growing with time. The forgetting of God is often subtle and gradual, like a slow erosion beneath the surface. At first, it may seem like a mere shift in priorities. Science and technology rise to prominence, traditional beliefs are questioned, and values once considered sacred become negotiable. Yet this process undermines the very fabric of trust and unity that holds people together. Laws and institutions, no matter how well designed, cannot replace the deeper roots of spiritual truth. Without those roots, ethics becomes subjective and justice becomes relative. What was once a shared vision of right and wrong fractures into competing ideologies, each claiming to hold the truth but ultimately sowing division. When the spiritual foundation is lost, fear and uncertainty begin to take hold. People seek security in material things, political power, or fleeting pleasures, but these cannot fill the void left behind. The vacuum created by forgetting God invites confusion and despair, making a nation susceptible to corruption and moral decay. Leaders may rise and fall, policies may change, but the underlying instability remains. This instability affects every aspect of national life, from families to communities, from education to governance. The absence of a common moral ground weakens social cohesion, fostering distrust and alienation among citizens. This loss of foundation also impacts a nation's identity. Nations are shaped by stories, values, and beliefs passed down through generations. When the anchor of faith is cut loose, the collective memory begins to fade. Traditions once honored become irrelevant or dismissed. The sense of shared destiny is lost, replaced by fragmentation and disillusionment. People become disconnected not only from their history but from each other as the threads that bind a nation into one fabric unravel. In this way, forgetting God sets a nation on a precarious path. Without a solid foundation, instability becomes the defining characteristic, making it impossible to withstand the inevitable challenges that arise. The security and prosperity built on shifting sands will eventually give way, and the nation finds itself struggling to hold together amid chaos and uncertainty. History shows that nations fall when they abandon God's covenant and truth. Throughout the ages, the rise and fall of great civilizations have not been random acts of fate, but responses to their relationship with the divine principles upon which they were founded. Time and again, the scriptures and historical records reveal a clear pattern. When a nation turns away from the covenant God established with his people, when it rejects his laws and the moral truths embedded in those laws, decline follows inevitably. This abandonment is not simply about religious observance or ritual. It is about the collective rejection of the guiding principles that sustain justice, mercy, humility, and righteousness. When those principles are set aside, the pillars that uphold society weaken and begin to crumble. The ancient world offers many powerful examples. The kingdom of Israel itself serves as a stark warning. When Israel embraced the covenant and sought God's guidance, it experienced periods of peace and prosperity. But when the people turned their backs, worshipped false idols, and ignored the prophet's warnings, the nation was shaken by internal strife and external conquest. The Assyrians and Babylonians swept through, destroying cities, scattering the people, and bringing devastation. These were not mere military defeats, but consequences of spiritual failure, a nation breaking the sacred covenant that once protected and sustained it. The prophetic voices called the people to repentance, pointing to the inevitable destruction that comes from forsaking God's truth. Beyond Israel, the lessons are echoed in the histories of Babylon, Egypt, and Rome. Babylon's arrogance and defiance of God's ways led to its downfall. Egypt's oppression and rejection of divine justice invited plagues and eventual subjugation. Rome, once mighty and disciplined, crumbled as it abandoned its moral compass and embraced decadence, corruption, and spiritual emptiness. In each case, the abandonment of divine truth preceded political instability, economic collapse, and social decay. This pattern is not limited to ancient history. It continues to manifest in modern times. When nations prioritize secular ideologies over eternal truths, when laws contradict moral absolutes, when societies tolerate injustice and turn a blind eye to corruption, the seeds of decline are sown. Prosperity may continue for a time, but beneath the surface, the foundation erodes. The moral and spiritual void left behind invites division, unrest, and eventual downfall. The covenant with God is more than a religious contract. It is the blueprint for national health and longevity. When that covenant is broken, history makes clear that no other foundation can hold a nation upright in the long term. Forgetting God leads to the erosion of justice, morality, and peace. These three pillars, justice, morality, and peace, are intertwined and dependent on a shared understanding of what is right and true. When a nation turns away from the divine source of truth and abandons the moral framework given by God, these pillars begin to weaken and eventually collapse. Justice, which depends on an objective standard of right and wrong, becomes distorted or lost entirely. Morality, once a clear guide for personal and social behavior, becomes relative and subjective, bending to the desires and whims of individuals or groups. Peace, the fruit of justice and morality working in harmony, becomes fragile and elusive. Justice is meant to be blind and impartial, rooted in truth and fairness. But when the foundation of divine truth is removed, justice becomes a tool wielded by the powerful rather than a shield for the weak. Laws can be manipulated to serve special interests, and fairness is replaced by favoritism or oppression. Without a shared belief in an ultimate moral order, there is no firm basis for justice. Courts become battlegrounds of competing ideologies rather than places where truth is sought and upheld. The scales of justice tip unevenly, causing division and resentment among the people. Morality suffers in the same way. When a nation forgets God, it loses the absolute moral compass that guides behavior. What was once understood as right and wrong becomes negotiable. Behaviors once condemned are normalized. Virtues are replaced by vices. Ethical boundaries blur, and cultural relativism takes hold, teaching that all values are equally valid and that there is no universal standard. This moral chaos breeds confusion and weakens the social fabric, making it difficult for people to trust one another or work together for the common good. Peace, which depends on justice and morality, inevitably suffers as well. True peace is more than the absence of conflict. It is the presence of harmony and well-being within a society. When justice is compromised and morality eroded, peace becomes a fragile illusion. Social tensions rise, conflicts increase, and unrest spreads. Communities fracture along lines of ideology, ethnicity, or class. Fear and suspicion replace trust and cooperation. Without the guiding hand of God's truth, peace becomes a fleeting dream rather than a lasting reality. In this way, forgetting God initiates a chain reaction that undermines the very pillars necessary for a nation's flourishing. Justice falters, morality weakens, and peace slips away, leaving a society vulnerable to chaos and decline. Repentance and humility before God bring restoration and healing to a nation. When a nation acknowledges its failures and turns away from the path of pride and rebellion, it opens the door for a divine intervention that can renew and rebuild what was broken. True repentance is not merely an expression of regret, but a profound turning of the heart, a recognition of sin, and a commitment to change direction. It is this posture of humility before the Almighty that invites mercy and grace, restoring the relationship between a people and their Creator. History testifies that no matter how far a nation has fallen, when it humbles itself and seeks God's forgiveness, healing can begin. The process of repentance requires honesty and courage. It means looking unflinchingly at the injustices, corruption, and moral failures that have taken root, and refusing to excuse or justify them. It means laying down the weapons of pride and self-reliance, and instead lifting up a cry for mercy. This act of humility breaks down the walls of arrogance that often separate a nation from God's favor. It is in this breaking that restoration is found, as the heart softens and opens to the renewing power of divine grace. The biblical narrative is filled with examples of national repentance leading to restoration. The story of Nineveh is a powerful example. When the people heard the warning of the prophet, they fasted, put on sackcloth, and turned from their evil ways. In response, God relented from sending destruction and brought peace and healing instead. This shows that repentance is not only about avoiding judgment, but about opening a pathway to renewed blessing and life. It is a call to return to the foundation of truth and justice that upholds a nation. Repentance also leads to unity. When a nation humbles itself collectively, differences can be set aside as people recognize their shared need for mercy. This common humility fosters reconciliation, healing wounds that division and conflict have caused. The spirit of cooperation and mutual respect grows, allowing the social fabric to mend and strengthen. It is in this spirit that justice can be restored and true peace can take root. Furthermore, the healing that follows repentance touches every level of society. Families, communities, institutions, all experience the transformative power of turning back to God. As the heart of a nation is renewed, so too is its vision, purpose, and strength. Repentance is the gateway through which restoration flows, offering hope even in the darkest times. Remembering God reconnects a nation to its true identity and salvation. A nation's identity is not simply shaped by geography, language, or politics. It is deeply rooted in its spiritual heritage and the values passed down through generations. When a nation remembers God, it recalls the source of its life and purpose, the covenant that established it, and the guiding principles that once led it to greatness. This remembrance is not a mere nostalgic look backward, but a powerful recognition that the nation's true strength and destiny are found in its relationship with the divine. Forgetting God leads to a loss of direction and confusion about who a nation truly is. Without this connection, people can become alienated from their own history and culture, and the values that once unified them become fragmented or forgotten. This disconnection breeds instability and a crisis of identity, as the nation struggles to define itself apart from the spiritual roots that once gave it meaning. Remembering God, on the other hand, restores a sense of purpose and clarity. It reminds the people that their existence is part of a larger story, one that involves divine intention and a calling to live according to higher principles. This remembrance calls a nation back to the foundation of its laws and moral codes, which were often inspired by divine wisdom. It renews the commitment to justice, mercy, and humility, values that elevate society and foster peace. When a nation embraces these truths, it creates a culture that honors life, respects human dignity, and seeks the common good. This is the identity of a people who live not for themselves alone, but for a purpose greater than any individual ambition. Moreover, remembering God opens the door to salvation, not only in a spiritual sense, but also in the practical restoration of society. Salvation here means deliverance from chaos, division, and decay. It is the healing of wounds inflicted by sin and neglect, and the restoration of hope and order. A nation that remembers God recognizes its need for redemption and turns to the source of grace and mercy. This turning brings renewal and transformation, lifting the nation out of despair and setting it on a path toward restoration. The act of remembering is itself an expression of faith and trust. It acknowledges that no matter the challenges or failures, God remains faithful and able to restore what has been lost. In remembering God, a nation reclaims its true identity, a people set apart by their covenant with the divine, called to live in righteousness and peace,